They are
The
close.
Lycan king followed his maid. What he saw made him lose control. Servants hurried along marble corridors, carrying lanterns that flickered like restless fireflies. But one maid moved differently. Ilara, slender and quiet, glided through the halls as if the shadows themselves guided her. Her presence was almost invisible, yet somehow impossible to ignore. King Eric, the Lycan king, sat in his private chamber, staring at the moon through tall, arched windows. The silver light made the sharp edges of his face even more severe. Known throughout the lands as fierce and unstoppable, he ruled with both strength and terror. People whispered of his Lycan form, a creature of legend, a beast who could tear armies apart. But tonight his thoughts were not of conquest or war, they were of her, Ilara. For weeks he had noticed her more than he admitted. How she moved silently, how she handled herself around the nobles, how her eyes, though calm, seemed to hold secrets the rest of the court could never understand. Tonight something inside him stirred, something wild, something that even the centuries he had walked this earth could not contain. He stood abruptly, his cloak brushing against the floor, and left his chamber. No one dared to question the king when he walked the halls at night. He followed her at a distance, careful to remain unseen, his movements almost too fluid for human eyes to catch. Ilara moved toward the gardens, the fragrance of blooming night flowers filling the air around her. She paused near the edge of a marble fountain, placing her hand lightly on the cool stone. Her lips moved in silent prayer, a gesture of something ancient, something forgotten by most of the world. Eric crouched behind a statue, his breath steady but tense. He had expected to see something ordinary, a maid going about her nightly duties. Instead, he saw something impossible. From the shadows, a soft glow began to emerge, pale and fragile, like the moonlight itself had taken shape. The light hovered near Ilara, pulsing as though it breathed with her. Eric's heart, long accustomed to the cold and the cruel, raced in a way that startled him. He felt an urge to step forward to reach out, yet he held back. This was a curiosity, yes, but more than that, it was a pull he did not understand. His instincts screamed to protect, to dominate, to claim, but a new, unfamiliar feeling settled in his chest. Awe. Ilara's eyes opened slowly, meeting the glow. Her lips parted in surprise, but she did not flee. Instead, she knelt beside the light, her hands moving over it as if stroking the air itself. The glow responded, dancing and shifting like liquid silver. It wrapped around her fingers and wrists, as though drawn to her touch. Eric's claws flexed beneath his gloves, a part of him longing to leap forward and destroy anything that threatened her. Yet the more he watched, the more he felt the beast within him falter. She was untouchable, yet she drew him in closer than any human ever had. A sudden rustle of leaves made her glance to the side, her eyes narrowing slightly. For a brief moment, Eric feared she might sense him, but she only returned to the glow, whispering a name he did not recognize. The words were soft, melodic, and carried a strange authority, a power he had never known could exist in a mortal. The wind shifted, and Eric felt it brush against his fur, hidden beneath his human guise. The beast stirred, impatient, jealous. It wanted to claim, to mark, to dominate. But Eric restrained it, gripping the edge of a stone statue until his knuckles whitened. He had never felt anything like this before, a hunger not for violence but for understanding, for connection. Suddenly the glow flickered violently, like a candle caught in a storm. Shadows peeled from the corners of the garden, forming shapes that should not exist. Dark tendrils slithered across the marble, reaching for Ilara. She froze, her hands trembling slightly, but she did not run. Instead, she rose slowly, her voice clear and firm as she spoke words that made the very air shiver. The shadows recoiled, curling away from her like smoke caught in a sudden wind. Eric's breath caught in his throat. No mortal should have that kind of power. Yet here she was, standing alone against forces that could have terrified armies. His instincts finally broke. Without thinking, he stepped forward, his cloak flowing behind him like a dark river. The shadows hissed, sensing him, and vanished into thin air. Alara's eyes widened as she turned to see him, no longer hidden behind his throne or the palace walls, but in full view. The moonlight caught on his broad shoulders and sharp features, and even she could feel the weight of his presence. "King Eric," she breathed, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and recognition. "I didn't see you there." "I did not come to be seen," he said, his voice low, rough, and commanding. "Yet I could not stay away." His eyes softened slightly, betraying the rare hint of human emotion beneath the predator's mask. "Tell me, what is this power?" Alara hesitated, glancing at the fading glow that lingered in the garden. "It is a gift," she said quietly. "One I do not fully understand. It has been passed down in my family for generations. It is tied to the moon and perhaps to this palace." Eric's brow furrowed. A gift, his mind raced. He had heard of many magics, curses, and divine blessings in his long life, but nothing like this. It frightened him, and yet it fascinated him beyond reason. The air between them thickened, heavy with something unspoken. Alara felt it too, a connection she could not name, a pull stronger than fear or logic. For the first time in years, the king was silent, watching her, vulnerable in ways no one had ever seen. "Be careful," he warned, his tone softening. "These halls, these people, they will not understand your gift. They will fear it and perhaps fear you." Alara's eyes met his, steady and defiant. "Then perhaps it is time someone understands." Her voice held courage, but Eric noticed the faint tremor in her hands. They stood in silence, the moonlight bathing them in silver. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale sang, its song haunting and beautiful. And then, suddenly, a sharp, ghostly wail echoed across the gardens. Both of them turned toward the sound. From the shadows, black shapes twisted and moved unnaturally. The darkness seemed alive, reaching toward Alara. Without thinking, Eric's hand shot out, his claws barely contained by his gloves, ready to strike. Alara stepped back instinctively, but she did not flee. The shadows halted as if sensing his presence, curling back and retreating into the corners of the garden. Eric's chest heaved, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from the realization of what he had seen. She was not merely a maid. She was something more, something that could rival even the power of the Lycan king himself. "Alara," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "you must leave this place. You are not safe here, not with what is coming." She shook her head. "I cannot run. This is my home and perhaps my destiny." Her words struck him, a mixture of admiration and fear coursing through him. For the first time in centuries, the king felt powerless, not in battle, not in command, but in the face of someone's spirit, someone's light. His instincts screamed, urging him to claim her, to dominate, to protect, to bind. But another voice, one he rarely heard, whispered to him to wait, to watch, to understand. He wanted to lose control, to reveal the beast beneath the kingly mask, but he restrained himself. He would not act recklessly, not yet. As the night deepened, he remained hidden in the shadows, watching her. And she, Alara, stood alone beneath the moon, her hands brushing the remnants of the fading glow, unaware of the eyes that followed her every movement, unaware of the bond forming between the predator king and the quiet maid. A breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it the scent of danger and something unfamiliar, something powerful. Eric's ears twitched, the beast within him stirring restlessly. He knew that the nights ahead would bring trials he could not yet imagine. And he knew, with a certainty that frightened him, that he could no longer turn away from her. The king had followed his maid into the shadows, seeking curiosity. But what he saw awakened something far greater, something dangerous, something beautiful, and something that could change the kingdom forever. And for the first time, Eric realized he could lose control, and perhaps he already had. The morning after the strange night in the gardens, the palace of Nareth seemed quieter than usual. Sunlight fell in long, pale stripes across the marble floors, yet King Eric felt no warmth. His thoughts were tangled, restless, like the shadowed forests beyond the kingdom walls. He could not stop thinking of Alara, her calm courage, her soft strength, and the strange, radiant power she had displayed. He walked the corridors silently, his presence commanding even without the usual roar of authority. The courtiers whispered in fear when he passed, but Eric ignored them. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the night over and over. What was this gift she possessed? And why did it stir something inside him he had never felt before? Meanwhile, Alara moved through her day as usual. She cleaned, arranged the palace rooms, and carried out her duties quietly, but her thoughts were consumed by the king's intense gaze and the strange pull she had felt from him. She had always known she was different. Her blood carried a magic that connected her to the moon, but until now no one, not even her own family, had seen it in action. That night Eric returned to the gardens. This time he stepped out of the shadows, his presence unmistakable. Alara turned as he approached, not frightened but alert. She had known he would come. Somehow she had known. "You should not be here alone," he said, his voice soft but firm. "The shadows, they were not natural. Someone sent them, or something old and dangerous watches this palace." Alara nodded. "I felt it too," she admitted. "I do not know what it is, but it knows me. It does not fear me, but it waits as if it expects something." Eric's gaze softened, and for the first time his eyes were almost human in their intensity. "Then you are braver than you know. Most would run, but you faced it." He stepped closer. "And I could not stay away. I had to see for myself." Alara looked at him carefully. "You are the Lycan king. You should not need to hide in shadows to follow someone." A shadow of a smile crossed his lips. "Even kings are curious sometimes," he said quietly. "And some things, some people demand attention." The air between them thickened. Words failed them for a moment, replaced by the unspoken understanding that neither had ever experienced. The king, feared by many, was captivated not by power, but by her quiet strength. And Alara, used to serving in silence, felt drawn to someone who was both terrifying and vulnerable. "Why are you drawn to me?" she asked finally, her voice trembling just slightly. Eric's eyes flickered with a mix of human emotion and the beast within. "I do not know," he admitted, "but I cannot look away. Something in you challenges me. Something in you calms me." Before they could speak further, a sudden noise interrupted the moment. Courtiers and guards moved through the corridors with haste. Eric's ears twitched, his instincts immediately alert. Alara stiffened, her hands brushing over the pale glow of her magic, as if instinctively preparing to defend herself. A group of masked men appeared at the garden gates, their intentions clear. They were not ordinary intruders. They carried weapons, and their movements were coordinated, precise. Eric's senses heightened. The Lycan within him stirred, ready to leap, claws unsheathed in his mind even if hidden in his hands. "Alara," he said, voice low and urgent, "stay behind me. Do not let them see your power until I give the signal." She nodded, swallowing her fear. "I trust you," she whispered. The intruders advanced. Eric stepped forward, his presence alone commanding respect and fear. Shadows of his wolf form flickered in the corner of his vision, restless and eager. The intruders faltered for a moment, sensing the strength they could not fully see. Alara lifted her hands subtly, murmuring words that sent a faint glow rising from her fingertips. It was not a weapon but a shield, soft, protective, yet impossible to ignore. Eric noticed the light and his eyes widened. "You are stronger than I imagined," he murmured. Together they faced the intruders. Eric moved like a shadow, swift and precise, his hands and feet striking with inhuman strength. The intruders were skilled but not skilled enough. One by one, they fell back, startled by the combination of Alara's magic and the king's deadly precision. As the last intruder stumbled, Eric turned to Alara. "You are remarkable," he said, his voice carrying pride he rarely admitted. But do you see what this means? Your presence here, your power, it makes you a target, and it could destroy you if we are not careful." Alara's eyes met his. "Then we face it together," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline racing through her veins. The tension between them shifted, growing deeper. They were no longer simply king and maid, master and servant. Something new formed between them, a fragile trust, an unspoken bond that neither fully understood but both felt keenly. Over the following days, Eric insisted on walking with her through the palace, teaching her how to move silently, how to protect herself without drawing attention. She watched him carefully, noticing the subtle ways he restrained his power, how his voice softened around her, and the rare moments when the beast within him seemed to sleep just to observe her. "You are learning quickly," he said one evening as they practiced in the moonlit training yard. "But more importantly, you are learning to trust. That is rarer than any skill in this palace." Alara paused, catching her breath. "I trust you," she said simply. The words surprised both of them with their weight. They were not just words, they were a promise, a bond, and a recognition that something greater than themselves had begun to form. But their quiet connection did not go unnoticed. From the highest towers of the palace, eyes watched and whispers followed. Rivals within the court, jealous of the king's attention to a mere maid, began to plot. They would not allow such a bond to flourish. One night, as Eric returned to his chamber, he found Alara standing alone in the gardens, her hands hovering over the faint glow that had first drawn him to her. The moonlight bathed her in silver, and she looked ethereal, almost otherworldly. "King Eric," she began, but he interrupted gently. "Tonight you do not need to explain, just be here. Let us watch the moon together." They stood side by side, the quiet night wrapping around them. Eric felt the beast stir again, but he fought it, keeping his control. Yet he could not deny the pulse of longing, the dangerous thrill of being near her. "Alara," he said softly, "there is something I must tell you, something I have never said to anyone." His eyes darkened, the weight of centuries pressing down. "I am cursed. My power is not only strength, it is isolation and it is fear. I have spent years hiding from it, hiding from myself. But you make me want to be more than just a monster." Alara turned to him, her expression gentle yet strong. "Then perhaps it is time to stop hiding," she said. "Perhaps it is time to face it together." Her words hung in the night air like a promise. The connection between them deepened, pulling them closer, yet something lingered, a warning, a shadow that neither could ignore. Suddenly, a chill wind swept through the gardens. The glow around Alara flickered violently. Dark shapes emerged from the corners of the marble paths, twisting and moving with intent. The intruders of the court were gone, but this was something older, darker, and more dangerous. Eric's eyes narrowed. The beast within him growled low in his chest, ready to leap. He stepped in front of Alara, muscles tense, ready to protect. But this was no ordinary threat. The shadows moved with intelligence, circling them, testing their defenses. "Alara," he whispered, voice urgent, "you must use your gift. Now." Her hands rose, glowing brighter as she called on the magic she had feared to wield. Light stretched from her fingertips, pushing the shadows back, forcing them to retreat. Yet as she did, Eric felt something shift deep inside him. His restraint, his careful control, began to falter. The beast, drawn to the danger and her power, surged within him, threatening to break free. He grabbed her hand instinctively, grounding both of them. The shadows recoiled further, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, as the last of the darkness disappeared, Eric realized what had happened. He had lost control, if only for a heartbeat. Alara looked at him with wide eyes, understanding more in that moment than he could have imagined. He had not just been protecting her, he had been overwhelmed by the strength, the courage, the light she carried. The king, who had ruled with fear and power for centuries, felt something new, awe, admiration, and a dangerous, intoxicating longing. And the night, heavy with magic and tension, ended with a single truth. Neither of them could remain the same. The palace of Nareth was quiet under the moon's watchful eye, but the stillness was deceptive. Beyond the walls, something ancient stirred, drawn by Alara's light and the presence of King Eric. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made shadows stretch longer, and even the trees seemed to lean closer as if listening. Eric stood in the gardens, muscles coiled like a spring, senses alert to every movement, every sound. His wolf instincts roared beneath his calm exterior. He had spent centuries mastering his form, controlling the beast inside him, but tonight felt different. The pull was stronger, sharper, more urgent. Alara approached quietly, her steps measured, the faint glow of her magic tracing patterns around her hands. She had spent the day preparing, gathering the strength and courage she would need. She knew the danger was greater than anything before, older, darker, and far beyond the court's petty schemes. "King Eric," she said softly, stopping a few feet away, "I feel it too. It's massive. Something waits beyond the walls and it knows we are here." Eric nodded, his gaze scanning the horizon. "Then we face it together," he said, his voice low and steady. "You and I, nothing else matters." Their hands brushed, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The connection between them, king and maid, predator and light, was now unbreakable, forged in danger, trust, and quiet admiration. The beast within Eric stirred, but instead of overwhelming him, it harmonized with his human side, ready to protect and fight at his command. From the forest beyond the palace walls came movement, shapes darker than night, shifting with purpose. The shadows of old magic, ancient and intelligent, moved toward them, drawn by Alara's power. The ground trembled slightly as if the kingdom itself sensed the approaching storm. "Ready yourself," Eric whispered. His eyes glinted in the moonlight, sharp and wild. "Do not be afraid, I am here." Alara nodded. Her hands rose and the glow around her expanded, forming a protective dome around them. Light and shadow clashed at the edges of the garden, the air thick with energy that made the hair on their arms stand on end. The shadows surged forward, lashing at the protective light. Alara's glow pushed back, but the dark shapes were relentless, feeding on fear and doubt. Eric stepped forward, his presence commanding, every movement precise and lethal. The beast inside him thrummed with excitement, but he did not lose control. Instead, he let his instincts guide him, moving with fluid grace to strike at the shadows, scattering them like smoke in the wind. "Alara," he called, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Focus your light on their hearts. Do not fear them." She obeyed, her glow intensifying, pulsating like the moon itself. With each pulse, the shadows shrieked and retreated, unable to withstand the combined force of her magic and Eric's power. And then the largest shadow emerged, a shape taller than a man, its form twisted and shifting, eyes glowing with cold fire. It was ancient, older than the castle, older than any living creature in Nareth. It had come for Alara, drawn to her blood, her gift, and the bond forming between her and Eric. The king stepped forward, placing himself between Alara and the monstrous shadow. His claws flexed, his senses heightened. The beast within him roared in anticipation, ready to tear through anything in its path. "Stay close to me," he growled, his voice both warning and protective. "Do not fight it alone." Alara's hands glowed brighter than ever. She drew power from within, from her lineage and from the bond with Eric. "I am not afraid," she said firmly. "Together we can end this." The shadow lunged. Eric moved with inhuman speed, striking it with a force that shook the ground. Alara's light cut through the darkness, slicing the shadow like silver fire. For a moment, time seemed to freeze, their combined power creating a spectacle of light and shadow, strength and courage, fear and hope. The shadow faltered, howling in fury, but it was not defeated. It recoiled, circling them, testing their defenses. Eric's eyes locked with Alara's. "Now," he shouted. Together they unleashed their full power. Eric struck with the precision of a predator, every blow weakening the creature. Alara's light enveloped it, pushing into its very essence, burning away centuries of darkness and anger. With a final roar, the shadow dissolved, evaporating into the night like mist under the morning sun. The garden fell silent once more, the only sound their heavy breathing and the soft hum of residual magic in the air. Eric dropped to his knees, exhausted but exhilarated. The beast inside him calmed, settling like a storm finally spent. Alara approached, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. You did it," she said softly, awe in her voice. "No," he replied, shaking his head. "We did it together." His eyes met hers, the feral intensity tempered by admiration and something tender. "You are stronger than I could have imagined, not just in magic but in spirit." Alara smiled faintly, her exhaustion visible but her pride shining through. "And you are not just a king or a beast. You are someone I can trust." For the first time in centuries, Eric allowed himself a small, genuine smile. The bond between them, forged in danger and strengthened by trust, was undeniable. The king and the maid, predator and light, had become partners, not just in battle but in the strange, new world they were beginning to shape together. As the moon continued its slow path across the sky, Eric reached for her hand. "Alara, stay with me. Not just in battle but in life. Let us face whatever comes together." Her eyes softened. "I will," she said, "if you promise the same. No hiding, no shadows, only truth and trust." "I promise," he said, the words carrying the weight of centuries, the power of a man and a beast united. The wind stirred, gentle and reassuring, carrying away the last whispers of the shadows. For a moment, peace settled over the palace, rare and precious. They stood together, hand in hand, hearts beating in sync, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it as one. But peace is never permanent in a kingdom like Nareth. Far beyond the palace walls, in the deepest forests, eyes watched. Ancient beings, older than even the shadows they had fought, stirred. They sensed the power Alara carried and the bond she shared with the Lycan king. And they waited, patient, calculating, knowing that the next challenge would be greater than any before. Eric sensed it too. His ears twitched, the beast within him alert once more. He tightened his grip on Alara's hand. "Something is coming," he whispered. Alara nodded, her glow faint but steady. "Then we will be ready," she said, "together." As they stood beneath the moon, the kingdom around them unaware of the danger, a faint howl echoed in the distance. Not Eric's, not a human's, but something old and powerful. A voice that carried across the mountains and forests, announcing that the story was far from over. And yet, in that moment, the Lycan king and his maid felt a rare and fragile victory. They had faced fear, darkness, and shadows beyond comprehension, and emerged stronger, not just as allies, but as equals, bound by courage, trust, and the first stirrings of love neither had expected. The night had tested them, changed them, and forged a connection that would survive anything. The king's heart, long buried under centuries of power and fear, had opened. And Alara, the maid who had once moved silently through the halls, had revealed her true strength, illuminating not just the garden, but the heart of the Lycan king himself. Together they turned toward the palace, ready to face whatever awaited them next, their bond unbreakable, their spirits intertwined, their destiny shared.